There is no life here. There is no rest, no respite. Another direct has come and gone, and still there is no word of Pikmin 4. Not even a glimpse of a teaser trailer on the horizon to spark hope in my heart.
For 7 long years, fans of the Pikmin series have awaited a 4th installment that wasn't Hey Pikmin because, let's be honest, nobody liked that game. Too different. Stop being innovative. For those 7 years, the most we've gotten is a few vague news articles and nothing else. So, with the beginning of the new decade, it's safe to say that the Pikmin series is essentially dead. So, I think it's the perfect opportunity to make a video about the series, because, haha, I'm known for relevant topics. Let's go. Okay, so considering I'm going to be talking a lot about the first 3 games, it is safe to say that there might or might not be spoilers. I'm kidding, there will be spoilers. If you didn't think there were spoilers, why'd you even come to this video? It's so obvious. Before we start looking at the ideas that I have for Pikmin 4, let's go ahead and look through the first 3 games to see what I think they did right and wrong. And believe me, there's a lot of both, so let's just get right into it. Let's start where this whole series began, in 2001 on the Nintendo GameCube. In my opinion, the original Pikmin has a ton of glaring issues, but what first game is perfect? Let's break this down into a few categories to make it a little easier to explain. In Pikmin 1, there are 3 types of Pikmin, and I'm going to quickly run down how each type works. Red Pikmin, fire resistant, 1.5 times the base attack. Yellow Pikmin can pick up bomb rocks, can be thrown higher, and you never need more antenna development. And blue Pikmin don't drown in water because blue. Alright, you got it? Good, because I'm not saying it again. Despite a relatively low amount of abilities to work with, the developers put a few really interesting puzzles into the game. The best example is this puzzle in the forest navel that requires all 3 Pikmin types to get a ship part. First, you use blue Pikmin to break a geyser that allows Olimar to get onto the next level. After throwing yellow Pikmin onto the second level, you use their high throwing capabilities to reach the ship part. Once you have the ship part, you have to carry it through a gauntlet of fire, requiring a lot of skill, or just use the red Pikmin. Fire resistance and all that. There's a puzzle in the distant spring that is the embodiment of chaotic good. In this puzzle, you have to walk yellow Pikmin on thin ledges and throw them to the ship part. Simple, right? Wrong. This actually requires a fairly high level of skill in using the swarming mechanics of the game. Another puzzle in this area requires you to use candy pop buds to alternate using blue and yellow Pikmin's abilities. That's pretty cool. While I'm on the topic of puzzles, the entire final area is an incredible and massive puzzle that tests your knowledge of the game. You have to use red Pikmin to traverse fire, use yellow Pikmin to grab bombs and break a wall, and the blue Pikmin are used to unroll some bridges that allow you to finally fight the final boss of the game. And speaking of which... I'm not going to cover normal enemies since they're fairly basic. The bosses, however, are a very strong feature of the game with the variety of each boss and the various ways to fight them. Each boss has a weak point, but they're usually not easy to find. The burrowing Snaggerit is weak to attacks on his head. The armored cannon beetle only reveals his weak point when you clog his, nose? Mouth? Whatever that thing is. Other bosses have their own strategies to beating them, but I don't have time to cover them all in this video. What I will talk about is the single best fight in the game. The final boss, the one, the only, Emperor Bulblax. There's actually many successful ways to fight this guy. When I fought him, I started out using bomb rocks to try to stun him, then switched to the strategy that I call, just punch the cheeks. And after a tragic loss of Pikmin lives, oh yeah, he can do that by the way, I switched back to the bomb rock strategy. There's other strategies than this, and that's what makes this boss so amazing. The AI of this game is truly 2001 AI. Pikmin don't seem to use a standard pathfinding AI that would tell the Pikmin their start and end locations, the walls, and any other obstacles in the way, such as enemies. Basically, there's these paths that the Pikmin follow to base. Think of a road network with very specific places to enter the road. This causes some strange movement for Pikmin carrying items, as you can see in the clips on screen. The roads, as I will call them, also don't always take the obvious path. In these cases, the blue Pikmin could carry this part through the water, but no matter what Pikmin you use, they will all travel across these bridges that you have to build. Also, sometimes the Pikmin will walk right into an enemy and get eaten. This really isn't the worst thing in the world, it just requires the player to babysit the Pikmin like the worthless, disposable, mindless beings they are. Thankfully, the AI got better over time. I haven't mentioned the gameplay much for time purposes. What I will say is that the camera is the only thing that controls poorly. The only ways to manipulate the camera is to center it behind Olimar or zoom it in and out. The camera has no way to follow any enemy or follow Olimar's movement. Both things were fixed in Pikmin 3, but I'm not there yet, so hush. One heavily debated part of the game is its 30-day time limit. I personally love it. It gives a sense of urgency and builds up the story as something meaningful. Honestly, it's not even that stressful to me, and I've only beaten this game 3 times. During the run I recorded, it only took me 13 days to get all 30 ship parts. For less experienced players, the time limit adds a little bit of challenge, and for experienced players, it's a nice touch to the story. Either way, I like it, some people don't, and that's where I'm leaving this segment. Pikmin 1 has many great things going for it. It has great puzzles and really strong boss fights. The camera controls are hard to work with, but eventually you get used to it. Now on to Pikmin 2, the game that revolutionized the series, for better or worse. Alright, so Pikmin 2 was easily the most innovative game in the series, but innovation isn't always done correctly. Pikmin 2 introduced dungeon-like gauntlets that take place underground, new Pikmin types, a new objective, and the removal of the overall time limit. Let's look at everything one at a time to see what was done well and what wasn't. In this game, you spend a majority of your playtime underground in caves. The general premise of these is going through floor after floor of enemies with a boss fight at the bottom. The main things that set caves apart is the enemies found within them. In a water-based cave, you'll find more water-themed enemies as an example. Unfortunately, the themes range from vague to non-existent if the cave is longer than 4 floors. Let's begin everyone's favorite segment of how many caves are these pictures from? Name is still a work in progress. Here is your first set of pictures. How many caves did I pull these from? The answer is 1! Every picture is from the Snagger hole despite varying immensely. Also, can we just talk about the second floor? How does this make any sense after this first floor and the entrance to the dungeon? Let's bring in another set of pictures. How many caves did I pull these from? The answer is 4. For some reason, this really ugly rusted look is used time and time again, and there aren't even mechanical enemies to match. Okay, so the themes of the caves are a downside, but what about the gameplay? Well, let's just say that Pikmin AI was not designed for working in tight spaces. At times, there's even a small ceiling above you that prevents you from throwing Pikmin at an enemy unless the stars align. Another challenge comes in the fact that during caves you can't get new Pikmin, with the exception of a candy pot bud, which is a rare thing to come across. This actually isn't a bad thing and forces you to think more instead of blindly rushing in. The greatest culprit of artificial difficulty in the caves are the traps. Keeping players on edge isn't a bad thing, but when your trap system requires that you walk the entire floor before actually doing anything else, that isn't good. This tends to make the caves extremely boring because you can't do anything until you've checked the entire area, lest you lose tens of very valuable Pikmin. Everything in the caves is really just meant to bring your numbers down, in turn making it harder to progress farther. If the caves were more diversely themed and cleverly designed with less artificial difficulty, I feel like I actually would have enjoyed them a lot more. I briefly mentioned bosses during the caves section, but I have a lot to talk about. Pikmin 2 somehow has some of the best bosses in the series, and some of the worst. Bosses range from fun and intense to that was a boss, all the way to complete frustration at the Pikmin AI. Every boss still has a quirk and a way to fight them, but unlike Pikmin 1, they don't feel as clever in the early game. Late game bosses actually tend to be pretty fun, even though I didn't play far enough this time to fight them. Let's start with some boring bosses. Empress Bulblax is fought twice in the game, and both times it's just a waiting game for her to stop rolling around. This gets extremely monotonous really fast. The Beady Longlegs is back and better than that. Oh, okay, it's dead. Okay, well, what about the Pileated Snagger? Oh, it's dead too. Do you notice a trend? These bosses and a few others in the games don't even feel like bosses. Even the Emperor Bulblax got heavily nerfed. You don't even need Pikmin to kill him with ease. Granted, it takes a while, but it's still easy. Fun bosses to me include the giant bread bug, which almost doesn't count as a boss, but it's still fun. The man at legs is hectic and requires some quick thinking to take down. The raging Bloyster is a really fun puzzle to find a way to cheese. And that's about all of them. Despite some very good ideas for bosses, they just aren't executed well in my opinion. There were a few changes to the 3 returning Pikmin from Pikmin 1. The only noticeable change is that the yellows can no longer carry bombs and instead are immune to electricity. And while that doesn't sound important, it made yellows go from being the least useful type to being one of the most important. See, electricity is insta-kill, so having a type that survives the main insta-kill thing in the game means you always carry some around, just in case. 2 new Pikmin types were introduced, purples and whites. Purple Pikmin completely outshine red Pikmin for combat purposes. They can stun enemies and do insane amounts of damage. 10 purples can do the job of 60 reds. White Pikmin are poison resistant, can find buried treasure, and if eaten by an enemy, they do significant damage. Both of these Pikmin are very valuable as they both can only be crafted with... Crafted? The script says created. I don't know why I said crafted. I'm over here playing Minecraft apparently. Both of these Pikmin are very valuable as they both can only be created with a candy pot bud underground. I'm a fan of having more abilities, but the Pikmin don't feel balanced at all. Overall, still a very good addition. The AI of the Pikmin does feel better than the first games did. The Pikmin seem to follow you better, and tripping isn't as severe. However, the AI still becomes a problem in the caves, where the Pikmin are forced to find their way in very tight spaces. This is just not feasible and leads to many situations that just feel unwinnable. Combine this AI with multiple enemies fighting you at the same time, and some spaces where you can't even point at the enemy because of a little ceiling, and you can get some pure rage. Not only does the smallness of the caves cause an issue, the maze-like spaces tend to make it really tough to tell exactly where the Pikmin will carry something to get back to base. All in all, the AI is really not a big deal above ground, but absolute torture underground. There's honestly not that much to say about the above ground areas except that they're actually really fun to play in. The areas of the game are much larger this time around, with many throwbacks to Pikmin 1 in the area design. Every level has a seasonal thing that looks really nice, and sometimes treasures are even based off the surroundings. The enemies are spread out just enough to make sure you don't get completely overrun, and the various tasks Pikmin need to do to unlock new areas feels refreshing. I'm also a huge fan of how you unlock the Pikmin. Reds are obtained at the start of the game, of course, but in the second area there's only blue Pikmin. What's more interesting is you need to get the yellows to get to them, but they're still considered to be in the field and even referenced by the ship. Then you go to the third area, find yellows immediately, and go back to get the blues. There's just something about this that I enjoy, and I can't really pinpoint what. One last thing I'll mention here is the time limit, or rather the lack of it. The time limit in its entirety is just gone from this game. The day-to-day time is inconsistent anyway, so I guess why bother with a time that the game just ends? There are special events that can happen in the world on days up into the 90s, but I'm not sure who would play that many days anyway. I personally prefer Pikmin 1's system, but I know there's people who prefer no time limit. What I will say is that it makes you think a little bit differently about how to manage your in-game time that's now been increased. There were many amazing ideas from Pikmin 2, and unfortunately they weren't all executed well. This game was only in development for about 2 years, and it shows horribly. The game only feels so much different from Pikmin 1 because of the caves and having 2 captains instead of 1. But things are going to get brighter for Pikmin. Nearly a decade after this game came out, Nintendo gave us Pikmin 3. That's right, Pikmin 3 was finally out. I truly believe the Pikmin series was at its best here. The game isn't perfect, but it's a game that I want to just keep playing. Just like the previous segments, let's break this down into a few categories to show this amazing game. Pikmin 3 vastly expanded upon the mechanics of each Pikmin, well, except Reds anyway. Yellow Pikmin are still electric resistant, but now they can conduct electricity to light up dark areas. They're also the fastest diggers of any Pikmin. Water mechanics have changed to where instead of having knee-deep bodies of water, it now has depth. To compensate for this, blue Pikmin can now swim around to attack enemies. 2 new Pikmin were introduced, Rocks and Wings. Rock Pikmin are basically purples but less overpowered. Wing Pikmin are great for carrying items over walls and water and can even follow you above water to access land areas behind water. You get wings before you get blues, so this is actually really helpful for a while. One new mechanic of the game is the ability to throw your captains around. Naturally, most of the puzzles in the game revolve around this one mechanic. Most of the other puzzles are based around bridge building and digging tunnels. There's actually a few scale puzzles in the game that are really interesting. Unfortunately, most can just be skipped entirely using the winged Pikmin. The puzzles certainly aren't to the standard of Pikmin 1's puzzles, but they aren't terrible either. Unlike Pikmin 1 and 2, bosses play a very key role in the progression of the game. Each boss essentially ends your progress in one area and opens up a new area to you. The bosses themselves are pretty good and utilize the Pikmin's abilities really well. Most of them are based on the abilities of the Pikmin found in the area. The Vehemoth Phosbat and the Clockwork both have hilarious names, and also are some of my favorite fights in the Pikmin series. Most of the fights aren't extremely easy though. The mini bosses are even easier, with most of them getting completely destroyed by red potions and red Pikmin. There really isn't much else to say about the bosses. They're fun, but not very challenging once you learn them. Pikmin 3's AI system is very different from the first two games. Automated tasks were introduced in many ways. Bridge pieces, grapes, and other items that can be carried by one Pikmin will go back and forth from their starting point and their destination. Once they are finished, unless whistled while working, they'll be right back where they started. Captains can also automatically pluck Pikmin when you aren't controlling them. Best of all, the Go Here function. Captains can now move around the map to get to a destination without you controlling them. This is useful for sending 3 captains 3 separate places in the map all at the same time. Although the captains move slower, they usually don't lose Pikmin unless you walk them through enemies. The only place this function doesn't work that well is the lily pads in the Twilight Forest.
The dark really well. What? Wait, what? What the heck happened? I had them doing the Go Here, and they didn't make that jump. Like, there's a bomb rock in the water. They didn't make that jump.
But if that's the only time this becomes a problem, then Nintendo did very well. Go Here is my single favorite addition to Pikmin 3. It adds a whole new level to micromanaging your Pikmin and captains. In Pikmin 3, the main collectible is fruit to save your home planet of Kopai. This fruit is also compressed into juice that lets you live for longer. I find this to be the best time limit system in the series. It rewards the player for achieving their goal by giving them more time to play. Depending on how much juice you have, you can plan your day differently. It allows you to have days that aren't stressful at all, and Brittany can get mad that we only got one fruit. And some days you have no juice left and it's pure panic. For those of us that build up a high juice supply, the game removes all of it during the game, and you are required to find something and eventually get your juice back. And I forgot to hit record for this part, so this isn't my footage. Professional YouTuber over here. One slight issue with the fruit system is that it's really easy to get a ton of juice. OST fruits. I forgot the M. Most fruits give between 1 and 3 days worth of food, and it isn't very difficult to get multiple in a day. Examples are shown on screen. Just look at these fruit counts. Granted, these were days that I played very well, but why would I need to get 10 plus days of food per day? I ended the game with over 80 days worth of food. Kopai is going to be eating well tonight. Just like the rest of the game, the fruit is unfortunately really easy to manage. So, despite the game being a little on the easy side, it's still a very good time and can be rather stressful when you want that one last fruit and there's 10 seconds on the clock. This is my favorite game in the series and probably one of my favorite games of all time. I never had a moment where I didn't really want to play the game anymore. So now that we've gone over the strengths and weaknesses of all 3 games, let's start on Pikmin 4 ideas. Hey, do you think this video is getting a little long? Yeah, I guess I'm right. Part 2 should be out within a week or so. There we will discuss many new ideas for the Pikmin series. Thank you all for watching, and this video has taken a lot of work, so I'd appreciate it if you left a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I will see you all in part 2.